Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Welcome. Welcome. We're back at it again. It's another video showing some stuff that I find interesting. Things that I read up on. Things that I think about. The last few couple of weeks, right? I've been on the politics vibe. Speaking politics. My thoughts on it. And a lot has been happening. It's taking a lot out of me not to speak about politics right now, considering everything that's happening in South Africa. I mean, everybody's talking about it. With the whole Mkwanazi um, um, uh, press conference that he held, where he implicated high officials in our government systems who are colluding with um, criminals who sell drugs. So yeah, kingpins to be exact. But yeah, it's been a lot happening in South Africa, and tonight the president is going to speak on it. Hopefully, after he's spoken, I'll understand more, know more, and I might make a video on it. But until then, I just want to watch and see what happens. I'm curious because everything is just happening so fast, and there's a lot of reactions already. But yeah, yeah. So with everything said, I'm just gonna focus on business for now. I want to talk business politics. I will leave our government and our policies and laws. I'll leave all of that alone for now. I'm going into business. The thing that I want to share today is that everybody knows Shell. We all know Shell, right? It's an oil rigging company. They export, they import oil, they make it, and they sell it in petrol stations and in other areas. That company, that company Shell, right, has been authorized to drill in the Northern Cape off the West Coast in an area called the Ultra Deep Blue by the Orange Basin. Now, I know that a lot of people it's like, what is this? Why are you even telling me this? But now this is South Africa. There's layers to this, and let me get into it. Now, Shell applied for this authorization last year, right? And in that same time, right, last year, in that same time, they announced that they were moving their business operations out of South Africa. They were leaving, which is which is a contradiction of business operations. You can't say you're leaving South Africa and then you get granted authorization the following year to then go and drill off the Northern Cape West Coast, and you announce it, you proudly announce it. It's one of those things where it's like, okay, so they want to benefit as a company, but they want to move their operations that way they're not liable for tax and employment. Like, what's happening? So they'll be allowed to operate here, and then they'll be exempt from South Africa's laws in terms of business operations, because I don't understand. They were closing down petrol stations, announcing they were leaving. Now they are gonna drill off Northern Cape. It's off. It's a contradiction of actions and events by an organization, by a company. Here's the kicker in this. Here's where it gets layered now. South Africa signed climate change agreements that they are gonna have zero net carbon emissions by 2030, that they're gonna reduce their use of fossil fuels, they're gonna reduce their support of fossil fuels. Now, politicians and business CEOs last year attended COP28 in Glasgow. Was it in Glasgow? COP28. And there was a consensus reached on the JET IP for South Africa, the Just Energy Transition Plan. Okay, the JET IP. It's it's one of those contradictory things, because now if South Africa agreed to climate change agendas pushed by other nations in the world that affect us, why is it that they're going to go around and authorize an oiling rig company, Shell, right, petroleum's company, to drill in the ocean? It's it how is that helping the agreements they signed upon? And why is it Shell has been given that authorization? It doesn't make sense considering that every other company last year that tried to help with the whole load shedding problems and was coming in with better solutions, they got shut down on the same principle that your energy solution doesn't align with with the agreement with our zero net carbon emissions 2030 agenda. But here comes Shell, and they've been given authorization to go drill in the Northern Cape. It doesn't make sense. Something is sus there. Something is extremely sus there. I'm not gonna make any judgments, but what I will say is just looking at that whole setup as a situation, right? South Africa's position globally and Shell as a company, their relevance to South Africa and other countries globally. And when you look at how they operate versus what would be smaller companies, newer companies, local companies, it again, it's off. It's sus somehow. But I want to leave that alone. I'll let you guys make do with that how you will. You will think on it. I think that I do think that something must be done about it. Some way, one way or another, something must be done about it. There needs to be either a clarity in what's actually happening, or there needs to be something done. There needs to be something done. That's the way I look at it, because right now it seems like South Africa is losing. That's what it looks like, and they're not, and someone else is benefiting. That's what it looks like. But I'll leave that up to you. I'll leave that up to you. Now, on to what's next. On to the next bit of business news. This is something, look, the two-pot retirement system is something I've had a problem with since its creation. I don't agree with it. I think that this is just some tactic to screw over the citizens, the hardworking people's pensions money. But yeah, we will come to that. We will come to that. No, for now it's like everybody's still new in this. They still enjoying the benefits. But here's some entity which benefited the most. SARS, the South African Revenue Services, made 12.9 billion rand in extra tax revenue from the two-pot retirement system. Let that sink in. SARS made money from people trying to access their early retirement funds. Money that was not supposed to be accessed. And even when accessed, if done the right way, was not supposed to be taxed. So now, because they failed with this whole increasing the VAT of South Africa, they've gone around in tricky ways and increased our electricity bills and our water electricity, the rates. They've done sneaky things to go about getting this tax money back. You know, they wanted that tax money. And they're now introducing new laws and new rules for people who are using solar. Now, we're coming into this whole situation where I think there's greed being used here. There's greed being exercised by either SARS or the people in charge of SARS, because the arguments don't make sense. It cannot be the um I went on a little rant there, but yeah, I went on a rant there. It's just that I don't agree with what SARS is doing in terms of taxing people for accessing their retirement funds. You're already taxing people on their incomes. It doesn't make sense that you're going to tax them twice on the same type of income. It's not like this money has made new money. It's money you work for. Then you put in a savings account. That's the same thing. SARS is, imagine if you had to get taxed every time you moved money from your savings account to your transmission account. That's similar to what's happening with this whole two-pot retirement system. you're being taxed to access money you already have, that you already worked for, that they've already taxed. But yeah, yeah. I don't think it's right. I think it's wrong. But what can we say? What can we say? It is what it is. They're in charge. These greedy people are in charge, and it is what it is. Now, when you look at how South Africa is implementing the two-pot system, you have to give credit where credit is due. Their implementation of the system is better than other countries which have had that system almost collapse their national GDP, their national liquidity. The thing is here, South Africa has good barriers, has good restrictions to safeguard this this system, to protect people's money. My thing is though, still, should enough people decide to withdraw their money around the same month, we could risk our country's currency being devalued. That 1 month could devalue the country's currency by a factor no one has even thought about. That one withdrawal month. Another thing is that when you look at the national liquidity risks, when you look at how much money the country has to keep in reserve and how much they're allowed to circulate to protect themselves as a country, when the country is now giving out those stored coffers to the citizens, that everyone now can have money, but the country itself doesn't have money, the country then loses power and influence. They can't do anything. So it's one of those things where the two-pot system, the way I see it, they say is to help SARS, but I don't see it helping SARS. I see the money getting stolen, looted, disappearing out of nowhere. And the people who would have done this will be dead, like in the next 15, 20 years. And everyone else is going to have to deal with the aftermath of that. And one of those aftermaths is having a reduced retirement fund in the country. You're gonna have what? Less capability to invest. That's what I'm getting at. You're not gonna have as much leeway to put your funds as a country in different assets to diversify them and gain profit. You're gonna have to stick to stable, conserved modes of wealth accumulation. And with the retirement fund growing at a pace much slower than inflation, it's just going to eat away at people's money. I don't see it working out for South Africa in that sense. I think the system is a shit system. And even if they have a better way of implementing it, they should not at least tax people. Don't tax people on money you've already taxed people on. It's backwards. My 2 cents on that. My 2 cents on that. Look, unpopular opinion. I think the two-pot retirement system in South Africa is being used as a tool for politicians to get at people's money. Politicians are struggling to get money from rich people. They're struggling to get money from tax because of their corruption. The money is being looted, going everywhere. They now need a new way to get more money. And they can't just go to people and say, give us your money. So I think this is one of those tools they are using to get at people's money. Unpopular opinion. But I'll move on to the next topic. Move on to the next topic of business. Blue label telecoms, right? Telecoms, telecommunications. So yeah, that's gonna be what I'm on next. Blue label telecoms is important because they are a majority shareholder in Cell C, meaning they own Cell C and can make unilateral decisions concerning the company. So why am I talking about Blue Label Telecoms? That's because Blue Label Telecoms is changing its name. They're changing their name to Blue Label Unlimited. And another thing that they're gonna be doing while changing the name is that they'll be selling a subsidiary of their company. What is it called again? Let me just check. Blue Label Com Equipment Company to Cell C. They'll be selling that company to Cell C, which doesn't make sense for anyone who sits down and looks at it. How can a company that owns another company sell to that same company? How is that allowed? How is that allowed? That's one thing I'll say that shouldn't be allowed. That falls under business gymnastics, which should allow for financial gymnastics, but we'll get into that. So they are selling that to sell C. Here's what I think this is gonna cause a problem later on for. So there's different laws for businesses and companies in different countries, and usually, usually when a company undergoes a name change and starts selling off assets to subsidiary companies and not to third parties outside of the circle, usually there's about to be financial gymnastics done here. Who this will affect the most is SARS, the taxman. See, when these changes are happening, they might not pay tax at all. They might even go a few years without paying tax. In fact, they might even claim returns from the government, from SARS. They might go and claim returns instead of getting instead of paying tax. But what they published here, what they reported is they are doing this to improve the company's valuation. So this is being done to help the company be perceived as more valuable. That Let me explain. Let me explain. Another part of what could be steering this change is because the government, is it ICASA? I think it's ICASA, but the government has been changing laws to try and accommodate Elon Musk's Starlink, a telecoms company. Now, those laws have been changed to be favorable for Elon Musk's company. But for all these other companies which have been operating in South Africa already, this is disadvantageous to them. They've basically lost a lot of money. Already by this changes, it's just they've lost a lot of money. So because of these changes and laws are now changing to accommodate these changes, some companies are trying to insulate themselves from these changes. They're trying to insulate themselves from the problems that will come from these changes. Another possible reason is that Cell C and Blue Label Telecoms equipment they could be companies with an excessive amount of debt in them. And with that debt, they could devalue what would be the profiting parent company. And the parent company doesn't want to have that stank on their resume, even though they are the parent company. But there could be many reasons here. There could be many reasons here. Anyway, um, yeah, I think that's gonna be it. Like I said, there's a lot that's been cooking in South Africa right now in terms of the politics and government and everything. And I do like my politics, but as it stands, I think I want to focus more on business right now and let some stories fully mature before I go into them because one day something is this, and then like within the same week that same thing could be something entirely different, and it becomes a matter of it's pointless reporting that story. You might as well wait until you have at least stable enough facts to go about reporting the story. But as for the business news that I've just said, it's a lot to think about. What's happening with Shell in South Africa is sus. SARS did what everyone knew they were gonna do. They're gonna benefit from the two-pot retirement system, and so like South Africans also benefited. You're not thinking about this the right way. You can't be taxed twice on the same type of money you made. I don't understand how else to explain that. I don't know. I don't know. Like that's like taxing your savings account. We are taxing your savings account. I don't know. But anyway, they taxed that money already. They taxed that money already. We'll leave it at that. With Blue Label and Cell C, you can see that a lot of financial gymnastics will probably go down there. But a lot is happening business wise, and you need to pay attention because that's our economy. The government are the people who manage the situation. They manage the economy. But as for the economy itself, its core, it's the people and businesses. And if you don't stay up to date, you could find yourself missing an opportunity, or you could find yourself being exploited because of ignorance. Anyway, it's a wrap. I'm out. It's your boy AP. Please share, like, drop a comment, do what you gotta do. But thank you for enjoying my content and watching it up to this point. We'll see you up to the next one. AP out. Cheers.